Krystal, what are you taking a look at?
Well, guys, the Ukraine crisis coming on the heels of the pandemic has just made it startlingly clear how vulnerable our own country is right now. Buffeted by supply shocks, beset by inflation, thwarted by financial elites and politicians in every effort to create resiliency and national self-reliance. How did we end up in such a precarious place? Well, friend of the show and executive editor for the American Prospect, David Dayen, he knows exactly who to blame. Mainstream economists, people like Larry Summers, who teamed up with Wall Street and corporate interests to push what David describes as a financier above all approach. In a biting new piece for the New York Times, David compares the economy that our Wall Street and economic elites built to a shoddily constructed bridge. He writes, if engineers constructed a bridge this prone to collapse, they'd be fired. But with our accountability-free elites, being an economist means never having to say you're sorry. Russia's war on Ukraine and alignment with China should be a wake-up call for all of us about the folly of putting short-term profits above literally every other thing. After all, these elites that David's talking about, they have made us dependent on Russian gas and the Chinese for pretty much everything else. And so through the prism of this conflict, let's just consider a few ways that the financier above all approach has left us completely exposed. Our first obvious vulnerability is our continued dependence on fossil fuels. Ken Klippenstein has been reporting for The Intercept on how an alliance between Saudi and Russia has been pushing gas prices up for us. This means that malignant regimes can easily hold an economic gun to our head, threatening ordinary Americans with price increases and job losses, not to mention threatening elected leaders with political disaster. It is a crime that the U.S. did not decades ago embark on a serious effort to dramatically reduce our dependence on fossil fuels through the development of renewables, including nuclear energy. And in fact, there is only one reason that that has not happened: DC's complete political capture by the oil and gas industry. Oil giants have spent massively over the years to fund climate denial, even as their own models revealed the impending toll of climate change as far back as the 70s. To this day, their lobbying and big money almost wholly determines our energy policy. We saw this all play out in real time with regards to Build Back Better and its climate provisions. In fact, a Greenpeace UK activist tricked an Exxon lobbyist into revealing on camera exactly what their strategy would be to kill any efforts at a serious shift away from fossil fuels. In this video you're about to watch, the lobbyist brags about talking to Joe Manchin's office every day.
Who's the crucial guys for you?
Well, Senator Capito, who is the who chairs the Senate, who's the ranking member on Environment and Public Works. Joe Manchin, I talk to his office every week. He is the kingmaker on this because he's a Democrat from West Virginia, which is a very conservative state. So he is, and he's not shy about sort of staking his claim early and completely changing the debate. So on the Democrat side, we look for the moderates on these issues. So
this Exxon lobbyist also admits that their support for a carbon tax is mere greenwashing and that they are only supporting it because they know it will never come to pass. Even with their tactics exposed, big oil was still successful. Build Back Better and its investments in renewables are completely dead, thanks largely to the aforementioned Senator Manchin and those other moderates in Congress. Just the latest win, though, for the oil giants who only benefit when gas prices spike and working class people suffer, handing a cudgel for Russia to use against our population and keeping us allied with monsters like the Saudi regime. Money and financiers, above all else, winning the day. But our vulnerabilities go far beyond spiking oil prices. These financiers and their allies have also created huge choke points that lead to economic misery. We ship jobs and critical supply lines overseas, primarily, of course, to Russia's lone major ally in this madness, China. We have also allowed massive consolidation to render our economy rickety and likely to break under any significant strain. And all for what? According to Dayen, the trade-off was clear: sacrifice resiliency, wage security, and community for the promise of a $5 pack of tube socks. We have sacrificed any semblance of self-sufficiency and degraded our industrial capacity, all on the altar of profits and cheap prices. And in the end, we didn't even get that. I don't know if you've noticed, prices have shot up thanks to the failures of this precariously architected mess. All of that means that we enter again into this confrontation with Russia with our population already stretched the breaking point, struggling to afford the basics, at the mercy of global shipping routes and the whims of Chinese leadership. But the capture of our political class is so complete that it even impacts the tools we have at our disposal to respond to Russia's imperial adventures in Ukraine. Our partners over at the Daily Poster are up with a piece explaining how our ability to sanction Russian oligarchs is hampered by Wall Street influence. Tomorrow we're going to post an interview with David Sirota that has all of the details there. But the TLDR is this. You can't sanction oligarch assets if you don't know what assets those oligarchs own. And Wall Street has used its influence to make the financial system in the U.S. extremely opaque. This means that economic royalists have neutered the kind of scalpel that you would ideally use in this situation. The ideal tools for right now would exact pain on Russia's political and financial elites without devastating ordinary Russians who are not to blame for Putin's war. Declaring economic war on ordinary Russians, though, is not only immoral, it is also dangerous. Right now, some significant segment of the Russian population is opposed to this war. History shows that inflicting mass suffering on that population is only likely to strengthen the hand of the Kremlin, allowing Putin and his allies to cover for their own failures by blaming the West with some legitimacy for the misery of the population. So Wall Street's maneuvering in an effort to protect money launderers and have as little transparency as possible has made that outcome much more likely. But if you zoom out even a little bit further, it is clear the reason we're in a conflict with Russia at all owes in large part to the capitalist market obsession that has dominated our domestic and foreign policy for decades. Our supreme dedication to capitalism, of course, led us to a long and dangerous Cold War with the Soviet Union, including a massive nuclear buildup on both sides. But even more proximately, after the dissolution of the Soviet Union, we helped to force brutal market reforms on Russia and push them to prioritize opening markets over building democratic institutions. Writing at Project Syndicate, Katerina Pistor, she argues that Boris Yeltsin was pushed into a program of economic shock therapy, including market liberalization and rapid privatization, by Russian reformers and their Western advisors. From their perspective, having to deal with any sort of democratic process would only slow the quote-unquote progress and would also delay the ability of Western capitalists to be able to profit from the opening up of Russia. By choosing capitalism, she writes, over democracy as the foundation for the post-Cold War world, the West jeopardized stability, prosperity, and as we now see again in Ukraine, peace and democracy, and not only in Eastern Europe. The free market radicalism of our bipartisan political class and Wall Street ghouls is a serious national security threat, crippling us at home, handing weapons to the worst actors in the world, and guess what, guys? No matter how much money you have, there is no escaping a nuclear holocaust. I cannot help but realize the way that all of these factors have come. Hey guys, thanks so much for watching.
That's right. Just as a reminder, you can become a premium subscriber today. Watch the full show completely uncut, our reactions to each other's monologues. You get to listen to it. You get to ask us questions, all that good stuff. Link is right there in the description or at breakingpoints.com.
Best of all, great way to say screw you to the mainstream media.